Have you ever made a bad gear buying decision? Well, I think I just did, and it rang to the sound of about $1,000. So today we are talking about the Slate Digital Raven MTi2. And if you're unfamiliar with this product, basically what it is a 27-inch 10-point touchscreen mixer for audio production, whether you're working in a studio environment or a home studio environment. And this problem that Slate is trying to solve here is the age-old kind of problem of digital audio where you are mixing with your eyes rather than your ears, because you're kind of visually seeing, digital EQs nowadays, a spectrum analyzer, and you're trying to make, boosts or cuts or fader moves, on your mixer window in your DAW visually rather than relying on your ears. And the benefit of a fader and tactile knobs on a console is that you're not really looking at a screen so much. You're basically making the tweaks and adjustments by ear. And that's kind of the advantage with a standard old console or control surface in a DAW environment. Now, the reason I was specifically drawn to the Raven, instead of just a normal tactile mixing console or a control surface, is the fact that it doubles as a 1080p 27-inch monitor. If you're interested in running dual monitors, this is a great way to go, in addition to the fact that you can literally reach out and grab a clip and break it or move it around or put in a fade. And so to me, that was a really cool nuance to this kind of problem-solving product. And so it immediately drew my attention there because not only could I do that with audio, but say I'm editing a video, I could literally go in and, grab a video clip and, break it. So it doesn't just apply to audio production too, it applies to your whole workflow as a audio or video editor as well, if you're a content creator. So that was a huge kind of draw to me. And so when I was making the decision, that was kind of one of the big things that really drew, my thinking towards this particular product over traditional faders. And two, we've used faders, traditionally for decades. My thought process was, isn't it time for something new? To some extent. And this is something too that I had gotten kind of accustomed to. I was running sound in our local church, and all the live mixing console they have is completely touchscreen based. And so I had already been kind of familiar with kind of the process of, mixing on a touchscreen. And so I thought, this wouldn't be too big of an adjustment, at home. And so I went ahead and I bought the Raven, and I actually went one step further and had a custom built studio desk built specifically to fit the Raven as well. And so this kind of review is more so about kind of workflow and some things to consider before you buy the Raven, and not so much, really critiquing the actual build of the Raven, although I'm going to be talking about it in the video. But more about, setting up and how to actually utilize it in your workflow, and some of the things that I've basically done wrong, and why, to be honest, I kind of regret making the decision to buy the Raven, or rather to build a desk specifically for the Raven in this manner. So these are just some good kind of ideas and thoughts that you should maybe consider before you, hit that buy now kind of button. So let's dive in here. The first thing that I would say right out of the box, even just working on previous touchscreens, like I said, in a church kind of setting, is the build quality is great on this thing. Honestly, in terms of resolution, it's significantly sharper and, has much better colors and responsiveness than, the touchscreens that I've used in our local church. So big, right out of the bat, big kind of plus there. It is a quality product for sure. Now, I do want to talk about some of the drawbacks here, or I would call them drawbacks, but again, this is going to be up to the user as well. The way that Slate really sells this product is by repping its what we call the batch commander window that comes along with the Raven. And basically what this is basically a toolbar that will come specific to the DAW that you use. You have basically one license out of the box, and you can purchase others depending on how many DAWs you use, but that basically kind of eradicate the need for keyboard shortcuts in your DAW. They basically are trying to give you an option to kind of eliminate the mouse and keyboard, so that you're not clicking or typing so much on your keyboard. And so I like the idea, but in a sense, with the amount of time that it takes me to kind of reach up and touch, the touchscreen to, in a sense, save me hitting two, buttons for key commands on my keyboard, I wouldn't say that it's really a speed boost, especially considering the fact that if you are used to using key commands, which for me, I am going on 13 years in Pro Tools, and I've used tons of DAWs over the years as well, but Pro Tools is the main thing that I use for work. I'm lightning fast in Pro Tools. I'm Pro Tools certified, and I've used Pro Tools just for over a decade. I'm very quick in it. And so for me, honestly, the Raven hasn't saved me any time. In fact, it's actually a little bit more hassle to actually have to reach up and grab it when literally on the fly, I could have literally hit a key command like lightning fast and already accomplished the same thing. So for me, the batch commander hasn't actually been that beneficial by any means. But I can see totally if you're new to the studio world and starting out in a home studio and you don't have very good command over key commands, how this would be super beneficial. You can basically touch what you need, the key command, with one, click, one tap, and you don't have to reach down and, put your hands on your keyboard and, kind of hit oftentimes multiple key commands to, accomplish the same thing. So I can see how it might benefit someone who's very new to pro audio. But for someone who's, been using key commands and that kind of workflow for a long time, I don't honestly think you're going to see a benefit in there. I certainly haven't. And I have tried to give it a really good fair shake. I've used the Raven for over 3 months now, and I've had a good chance to kind of play around with it. I will say as a con here, the calibration process of setting up the Raven is quite a pain. It took me literally a full weekend to perfectly fine tune, the touch response on the Raven to my DAW and to, my Mac OS. And so it was honestly a lot harder than I thought it was going to be to get it perfectly fine tuned. That being said, it is fairly accurate once you get it perfectly calibrated. Now, I will go out and say I'm actually not even using the batch commander at all anymore. In fact, if you're unused to the Raven, basically what happens is instead of launching, say, Pro Tools or Logic or Cubase or whatever your DAW of choice is, like you would normally do from your applications folder, you have to load it basically through Slate's kind of little window there. And so when it loads it up, it loads kind of like a skin onto your DAW. For lack of a better way of explaining it. And so you actually have to perfectly align that skin so it actually matches your DAW. And this is actually kind of a really tedious process, and you can kind of save some Windows configurations. But for me, this is really annoying to have to do. And so because of that, I don't even use that functionality there. I literally just load up my DAW and I literally just use the Raven as simply that, a touchscreen. And so for me, this hasn't been super beneficial. And to be honest, I haven't seen a ton of, workflow improvement with the Raven. Now, a lot of this honestly has to do not so much with the Raven itself, but the way that I set up my desk. You'll notice in this video here how the way I built the desk, it's kind of like based off of the output kind of platform desks, with the exception of it being built to perfectly fit the Raven. And I wish, going into this, I had studied up on the Raven a little bit more before buying it, because the Raven is actually meant to be sat fairly vertical on a desk to where it's very close to you and you can reach out and just touch faders and pull knob, like your actual pan knobs, on your mixer and your DAW. And the way I have it set up, you'll see this in the video clip here, but I have it set so it's actually in line like with my desk rack. And so the way I thought about this was it was nice because where I'm sitting in mix position, I don't have to crane my neck, up at the screen above, or if it was sitting on the desk, I don't have to like be sitting so close to it right there. So it was a visual kind of consideration, but it turned out this was actually a poor choice here because the Raven is meant to be super close so that you can kind of grab, each fader and, grab a pan knob or, tweak a EQ kind of parameter. And so because of this, with the workflow that I have here, I actually now have to actually reach out and stretch out my arm just to even reach the console because there's a decent amount of space between the end of my desk and the Raven. And because I have it kind of mounted kind of on its side here. And what I basically did is I actually ripped off, I didn't rip it, you can actually take it off, but the stand that comes with it so it could sit in the desk. And, from a monitor standpoint, this is awesome. I actually couldn't be happier with this workflow because I can perfectly sit and not have to crane my neck around. I'm literally just looking perfectly right at the Raven, and then I can literally just swivel my eyes up to my iMac right above so that I can see, what I'm working on either screen. And as an editor, an audio editor, this has been actually awesome. I can't really complain about this workflow at all. But for the actual utilizing the touch features on the Raven, it's actually quite a pain because I literally have to sit forward into my desk and reach out and kind of sit up too so that I can kind of get a good visual on where I'm grabbing on the fader. And so this is my kind of like takeaway here. If you're looking into getting the Raven, really think ahead with how you want to place your desk with that. It is meant to literally be kind of like, very vertical so that you're kind of grabbing it. And they do make desks kind of made for that for the Raven that you can purchase. And you'll notice in pretty much all of them, they are pretty much vertical in position. And so I wish I had kind of thought ahead of that because I'm basically not really able to use the Raven to the degree that it was meant to be used. Now, in terms of even when I'm sitting at the console, I want to talk about workflow in terms of ease of use too. Completely just getting rid of the batch commander and the gestures touch. There are a ton of different gestures that you can use on the Raven. And honestly, as someone who's been using a mouse and used to faders in the past, tactile faders, it's been a hard adjustment to memorize those different motions. And honestly, like I said before, 9 times out of 10 for me, because I'm so fast with keyboard shortcuts, it's honestly going to take me significantly less time just to type in a key command really quick on the fly than to literally spend a couple times trying to get a gesture or a tap, the perfect tap, 5-finger tap, to do a certain function on the Raven. And so because of that, whether it's use or error, I feel like I'm just a whole lot faster without that, having to worry about that. In terms of responsiveness, the Raven actually is very responsive, but in terms of comparing it to a fader, like motorized faders, hands down, it's a much better experience, I would say, just from personal experience using both on just a motorized fader, because you can literally do such small, minute, increments on your fader, whereas on the Raven, you kind of have to really visualize, where you're at on the fader. You can't feel the fader moving underneath you. All you're seeing is, the fader move up and down on your surface. And so, going back to, again, listening, you really do have to do that, but it's often hard because if you're not accurately on, say the fader or the pan knob, you won't even be actually doing any effect with that. And so that's why right out of the bat, I thought, going in here, I'd be able to get adjusted to it. But honestly, it's a really hard learning curve, especially for someone who works in pro audio on a daily basis. it's been an adjustment. And honestly, I can confidently say this, I don't use the Raven to its full capability. And so these are just some thoughts that you might really want to consider. If you are or have been working in pro audio or even just in your home studio and you know your DAW inside and out, this is honestly, in my opinion, not going to benefit you. And in fact, if you are really looking for something that's very good at, doing drawing automation and making fader moves and really fine, minute, very small pan adjustments when you're automating things, honestly, you might just consider just getting like a, digital control surface. I honestly think you will be happier. I honestly certainly wish that I had gone that route. And I'm honestly considering, because I don't really want to sell the Raven, I built a desk for it. I spent $500 on a desk. I spent $1,000 on the Raven. I'm already in quite a decent chunk of change. I don't want to sell it because now it's doubling as a second monitor and I have my desk exactly how I want it, but I'm honestly thinking about getting like a one fader port from like PreSonus or something, just so I have the ability to kind of automate a little bit more fine-tuned. And so again, I realize that this isn't really Slate's fault to some extent either, because it's kind of how I've set up my desk. And so this is why it's such a big consideration when you're stepping into the Raven, because you really want to make sure you have the right setup. Small things like how you have to sit in your chair or how you have to, shrug over to get, in touch with the Raven, will be, kind of like night and day differences, in terms of effectiveness. And so these are just some things I really would encourage you to, consider. And two, if you can, honestly experiment. If you can get your hands on any type of touchscreen versus a fader. I already had a good idea on what I was getting into. And so that's why I'm not blaming Slate Digital at all. It's just I didn't think ahead enough with my desk, situation. But honestly, between the two, going in, I knew that a fader was going to be easier to control. And so I knew there was going to be some workflow adjustment. And so that's something you do have to bargain with. You got to know what you're getting into a little bit with that. Now, kind of finally wrapping this up a little bit, is it like a night and day difference? Are you going to really see workflow improvement? Well, it really depends on whether or not you're, sunk deep into, understanding your DAW. If you've been, working in pro audio a long time, or whether you're just getting started. Now, I do find it ironic that really, if you're just getting started and, you haven't spent time learning key commands, yeah, it may be faster, but right out of the gate, are you going to want to spend $1,000 on basically a tablet that's going to allow you to not have to learn key commands in the same way? Honestly, if I was starting out, that would not be something that I would be, spending $1,000 on. I would want to spend it on a better microphone or better monitors or, better mic preamp. There are so many other things that will directly affect the quality of the work that you do, where this is just basically kind of a nice thing to have, on the side, where you can better control things, even a control surface, or a mixing console that's just functions as a control surface. It's just helping you to mix more efficiently. There's not directly impacting quality. And so that's something you definitely want to think about, if you're considering making the Raven a investment with that. So these are just some thoughts as a Raven user. Again, I've been using it for 4 months. I'd like to say that I hope I am, eventually able to, better adjust to the Raven, but it's been quite a kind of a disappointing, experience, working on the Raven. And that's, again, not really Slate's fault at all. It's more, how I've set it up in my workflow and the fact that, again, I'm very quick with key commands already. And so it's not of a huge benefit to me with that. So these are just some thoughts. If you enjoyed this video and you like content based around audio production and making music, please do hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for future content. And I will see you in the next video.